First of all, a sequence like that, in which the curator of mammals and reptiles, Jack Lester, who you saw holding it.
David Attenborough is a legend who has spent his whole life showing us the beauty of our planet. Throughout his massive career, he became one of the most famous people in the world and owned several impressive homes along the way. But now, as Sir David celebrates his 100th birthday, the house where he plans to spend his final days is a lot different than the big mansions you might expect. It's a huge shift from the luxury he knew at the height of his fame. So, what kind of house does David Attenborough actually plan to die in? And why did he choose this place over everywhere else? Join us as we take a look at the home he now calls his sanctuary. The Gift of Time: How a Jewish refugee's amber changed David's life forever. It's hard to imagine a world without David Attenborough, but every legend has a beginning. Before he was the voice of the planet, David was just a curious kid growing up on a college campus in Leicester. While other kids were playing sports, David was scouring the ground for fossils and stones, treating every pebble like a hidden treasure. He wasn't alone in his ambition either. David was the middle child of 3 brothers, and talent clearly ran in the family. His older brother, Richard, would go on to become a Hollywood powerhouse, while his younger brother, John, eventually climbed the ranks as a top car executive. But even with all that success, the Attenborough home was built on kindness. During the heat of World War II, his parents opened their doors to 2 Jewish refugee girls fleeing Germany, adding 2 adoptive sisters to the lively household. One of those sisters, Marianne, actually gave David a gift that would change his life forever: a piece of amber with prehistoric creatures trapped inside. It was like holding a time capsule in his hand. Decades later, that very piece of amber became the star of one of his world-famous documentaries. But David wasn't just a collector, he was a bit of a young businessman too. When he was only 11, he found out the local university needed newts for their research. He told them he could find as many as they wanted for 3 pence each. What he didn't tell them was that he was catching them from a pond right next door to the department. He had the eye of a scientist and the hustle of an entrepreneur from the very start. The real light bulb moment for David's mission came in 1936. He and Richard went to a lecture by a man known as Grey Owl, a fierce advocate for nature. Grey Owl spoke about saving beavers and warned that humans were destroying the Earth's delicate balance. Back then, nobody was talking about ecological disasters. But for young David, those words stuck like glue. It became the creed he would live by for the next 90 years. Following his passion, David won a scholarship to study geology and zoology at Cambridge. Even when he was called up for national service in the Royal Navy, spending 2 years stationed in North Wales, his heart never left the natural world. He was a man shaped by curiosity, fueled by a love for the wild, and ready to show the rest of us exactly what we were in danger of losing. This wasn't just an education. It was the birth of a global icon. But David didn't become a star overnight. He actually started out behind the scenes because a boss thought his teeth were too big for TV. It took a bit of luck and a last-minute emergency to finally put him in front of the camera. The Accidental Star: How Jack Lester's illness launched a television legend. After hanging up his Navy uniform, David didn't dive straight into the wild. In fact, he started out in a pretty quiet spot, editing science textbooks for kids. But David wasn't the type to stay behind a desk for long. He got bored fast. In 1950, he took a shot at a radio job with the BBC. They actually turned him down. But as fate would have it, his resume caught the eye of Mary Adams, a big boss in the BBC's brand-new television department. At the time, David, like most people in Britain, didn't even own a TV. He'd only seen one program in his entire life. Still, He took a chance on a 3-month training course, and by 1952, he was a full-time BBC man. Funny enough, Mary Adams almost kept him off our screens forever. Why? She thought his teeth were too big for the camera. So, he started behind the scenes, producing quiz shows and even a series about folk music. But you can't keep a nature lover away from animals for long. His real journey began with a small show called Animal Patterns, where he filmed animals from the London Zoo. It was there he met Jack Lester, a reptile expert, and the two cooked up a wild plan. They'd go on an actual expedition to collect animals. They called it Zoo Quest. Just as they were ready to film, Jack fell ill, and David had to step in as the presenter at the very last minute. Suddenly, the man with the big teeth was a star, and audiences loved his natural, easygoing style. As the BBC grew, they wanted David to move to Bristol to join a new nature unit. But David was a family man and didn't want to uproot his life in London. Instead, he did something bold. He started his own department called the Travel and Exploration Unit. This gave him the freedom to keep filming Zoo Quest while exploring new places. Even when he briefly left to study for a degree in anthropology, the BBC couldn't let him go. They begged him to come back, not just as a producer, but as the boss of the entire BBC Two channel. When David took over BBC Two in 1965, the channel was struggling. It didn't really have a vibe. David changed that overnight. He got rid of the weird kangaroo mascot and decided to make the channel a place for everything cool and different. He filled the schedule with a wild mix of music, comedy, and science. If you've ever laughed at Monty Python or watched a high-stakes game of snooker, you can thank David. He even brought snooker to TV specifically because it was a great way to show off the brand-new color television technology. Those colored balls looked amazing on the new screens. He even helped invent the yellow tennis ball because the old white ones were too hard to see on TV. Even though he was a big-shot executive, David made sure his contract allowed him to get back into the field every now and then. He traveled to Tanzania to film elephants and even trekked into the highlands of New Guinea to meet a lost tribe that had never seen a Westerner before. These trips kept his passion alive while he managed the stress of the office. One of his biggest wins as a boss was ordering massive 13-part documentaries that covered huge topics like the history of art. These sledgehammer projects were a massive hit and set the stage for the kind of nature epics we see today. David had a dream to make a massive series about evolution, but there was one problem. He was too busy being a manager to host it. By 1969, he was promoted again, this time in charge of both BBC channels. Now he was dealing with budgets, board meetings, and firing people. It was a long way from the jungles and fossils he loved. When people started whispering that he should be the Director General, the highest job at the BBC, David called his brother Richard and told him he had no interest in it. He didn't want more power. He wanted to get back to the mud and the animals. In 1973, he finally walked away from his big desk to become a freelance broadcaster. He immediately headed to Indonesia to film in color for the first time. He realized that most nature shows focused on Africa, and he wanted to show the world the wonders of Asia. This trip was just the warm-up act. Behind the scenes, he was already writing the scripts for what would become his masterpiece, Life on Earth. Because his vision for life on Earth was so huge and expensive, the BBC had to team up with an American network to pay for it. While the lawyers worked out the deals, David stayed busy. He hosted shows about tribal art, voyages of discovery, and even a kids' show about mythical creatures like unicorns. Eventually, the money came through, and in 1976, production began on the series that would change nature documentaries forever. From catching newts in a college pond to running one of the biggest media companies in the world, David Attenborough's path was never a straight line. But every step he took, whether it was picking the color of a tennis ball or trekking through a jungle, was leading him back to his true sanctuary, the natural world. He had spent years telling other people's stories, but now he was finally ready to tell the greatest story of all, the story of life itself. But David didn't do it alone. While he was traveling the world, he had a partner at home who made everything possible. For nearly 50 years, Jane Oriel was the person who kept his life steady while he was busy making history. A 47-year foundation, how Jane Oriel made the Attenborough era possible. Behind every great man, there is often a heartbeat that keeps everything steady. And for David Attenborough, that heartbeat was Jane Elizabeth Ebsworth Oriel. They tied the knot in 1950 when they were just a pair of 20-somethings starting out in London. For nearly 50 years, Jane wasn't just David's wife, she was his anchor. While David was off exploring the farthest corners of the globe, Jane was back in Richmond, building the home and family that gave him a reason to return. Together, they had 2 children, Robert and Susan. Following in their father's footsteps of curiosity, Robert became a university lecturer, while Susan led a primary school. But life as the world's most famous naturalist came with a heavy price. David has been incredibly honest about his one big regret. He missed huge chunks of his children's lives. He'd be gone for 3 months at a time, and as he told documentarian Louis Theroux, "You can't just replace those months when a child is 6 or 8 years old." It became a bit of a running joke in the family. Whenever a memory was brought up, they'd tease him, saying, "Oh, you wouldn't remember that, Dad. You weren't there." Despite the distance, the love in that house was the foundation of David's massive career. But in 1997, tragedy struck while David was halfway across the world in New Zealand, filming The Life of Birds. He got the devastating news that Jane had suffered a brain hemorrhage and fallen into a coma. David raced back to the UK, reaching the hospital just in time. In a final, heartbreaking moment, Jane gave his hand one last squeeze before she passed away at the age of 70. Losing Jane left David lost. He described himself as getting into a total mess without her. That's when his daughter, Susan, stepped up in a huge way. She left her job as a head teacher to help her father, eventually becoming his business partner and the person who makes sure his fridge is always stocked. Even with that support, the silence in the house was deafening. But David refused to move. He still lives in the same home they shared, surrounded by the garden they planted together. To him, her spirit is still right there in the hallways and under the trees. So, how did a man facing such deep grief keep going? He did what he does best. He went back to nature. David found that the only real comfort for a broken heart was the natural world. He threw himself into his work, not because he wanted to forget, but because he felt an obligation to the planet and his colleagues. Having a script to write or a film to finish was the relief that kept him moving forward. Even now, well into his 90s and beyond, David hasn't slowed down. From his latest Netflix hits like Secret World of Sound to his ongoing advocacy for the Earth, he continues to work with a passion that is fueled by the stability Jane gave him for half a century. He turned his personal loneliness into a universal message, showing us that even when we lose what we love most, there is still beauty to be found in the world around us. David Attenborough's story isn't just about animals and the environment. It's a story about a man who lost his anchor but found the strength to keep sailing. But even in his darkest times, David never stopped being a scientist. He used his work to heal, and soon his dedication became so famous that the world's top researchers began to trust him with secrets they had never shared with anyone else. The serious science. Why researchers finally trusted David with their secrets. In 1979, the world of television changed forever with a series called Life on Earth. This wasn't just another nature show, it was a total game changer. David Attenborough decided to treat nature with the same respect you'd give a serious history documentary. Because he took the science so seriously, world-class researchers started trusting him with their deepest secrets, letting him film things that had never been seen on camera before. But it wasn't just about the facts, it was about how they filmed it. David used brand new tech to get shots that seemed impossible at the time. He'd use the magic of international travel to hop across continents in a single scene, showing you a bird in Africa and a lizard in South America back to back. Even though he was the star, David was humble. He made sure the camera spent more time on the animals than on him, because he knew they were the real main characters. The success was massive, but David was just getting started. 5 years later, he came back with The Living Planet, focusing on how animals adapt to their homes, from scorching deserts to freezing tundras. Then, in 1990, he finished what people called the original trilogy with The Trials of Life, which looked at the drama of animal behavior, from birth all the way to the end. It was a critical hit and sold all over the world, making David a household name everywhere. Even when David reached the age when most people start thinking about retirement, he actually sped up. In the 90s, he took us to the coldest place on Earth for life in the freezer, the first big look at Antarctica. After that, he tackled a subject his producers were actually worried about: plants. How do you make a juicy show about things that don't move? David used time-lapse photography to speed things up, showing that plants are actually dynamic, competitive, and even aggressive. It was so good, it won a Peabody Award. Next, he set his sights on the skies. David admitted he wasn't a bird expert, but that didn't stop him. He made the life of birds by focusing on their wild behaviors instead of just their names. And as camera technology got better, so did David's shows. For the life of mammals, he used infrared cameras to see in the dark, giving us iconic shots of him sitting right next to chimpanzees and grizzly bears. Then, he used tiny macro lenses to dive into the world of bugs for life in the undergrowth, showing us monsters in our own backyards. By 2008, David looked back and realized he had accidentally built a giant encyclopedia of life. He had covered almost everything, except for reptiles and amphibians. When he finally finished Life in Cold Blood, he felt a huge sense of relief. He had completed the set of all the major groups of living things on land. He famously said that if you had told him 20 years earlier he would finish such a mammoth task, he'd have called you ridiculous. Even then, he found one more piece of the puzzle. In 2010, he made First Life, which looked at the very first creatures to ever exist on Earth, even before his 1979 series began. He felt that this finally, truly, completed the set. David's hope wasn't just to be famous. He wanted these shows to still mean something 50 years from now. He wanted to leave behind a map of the world so that we, and the generations after us, would know exactly what we have and why we need to protect it. It's more than just a collection of shows. It's his legacy to the planet. But even a career as perfect as David's has faced some tough questions. Over the years, some of his filming choices and personal views have sparked big debates that show even a hero of the natural world isn't perfect. Faking the Arctic. Why the BBC's polar bear controversy still haunts David's legacy. Even a living legend like David Attenborough isn't without a bit of drama. While we mostly see him as the ultimate hero of the planet, his long career has hit a few bumps in the road that have sparked some pretty heated debates. One of the biggest shocks for fans came in 2011 during the series Frozen Planet. The BBC had to admit that those adorable scenes of a polar bear nursing her cubs weren't actually filmed in the freezing Arctic, but inside a zoo in the Netherlands. Critics felt cheated, arguing that faking nature scenes, even for the safety of the animals, damaged the trust he had built with his audience for decades. But the controversy didn't stop at filmmaking tricks. David has also faced backlash for his views on human overpopulation. He once suggested that the growing number of people in places like Africa and Asia was a main cause of environmental collapse. This didn't sit well with everyone. Many people called him out for ignoring the elephant in the room: the massive amount of resources consumed by wealthy, developed nations. They argued it was unfair to point fingers at the world's poorest when the richest are doing the most damage. Even his environmental activism has been questioned. Some critics, like writer George Monbiot, argue that David was way too slow to sound the alarm on climate change. They feel his early documentaries were too beautiful, showing an untouched world that made us feel safe while the planet was actually burning. From being accused of falling for pseudoscience regarding animal testing to rumors that the BBC blocked one of his episodes to avoid a right-wing backlash, David's journey hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows. Yet, through all the noise, his supporters say his impact is undeniable. He might not be perfect, but he's the man who finally got the world to pay attention. And in the end, that might be his biggest save of all. But after spending 90 years exploring the most dangerous places on the planet, David's heart doesn't belong to the wild anymore. Instead, it belongs to a quiet corner of London, where he has built his own private paradise. The world's favorite backyard. Why David calls Richmond his only sanctuary. After traveling to literally every corner of the planet, you might think Sir David Attenborough would want to spend his 100th year on a private island or a hidden mountain peak. But the man who has seen everything has made a surprising choice. His favorite place on Earth isn't a tropical paradise, it's his quiet, leafy home in Richmond, London. While the world knows him as a global wanderer, David has spent nearly 30 years turning this one spot into his ultimate sanctuary. Richmond is the perfect place for a man like David. It's a beautiful, upscale neighborhood tucked right next to the River Thames and the famous Kew Gardens. It's the kind of place where giant herds of deer roam freely through Richmond Park, just minutes away from fancy boutiques and coffee shops. It's one of the most expensive spots in London, with average house prices hitting almost £1 million. But for David, this isn't about status. It's about the roots he planted with his wife, Jane, over their 47 years of marriage. Since Jane passed away in 1997, the house has become more than just a building. It's a living memory. Even though he's neighbors with superstars like Mick Jagger and his late brother, Richard Attenborough, David leads a surprisingly modest life behind his front door. But that doesn't mean he isn't active in the community. In a legendary move, David actually dropped $1 million to buy the hole-in-the-wall pub right next door to his house. Why? Because it had been sitting empty for 2 years, and he didn't want developers to turn it into something unrecognizable. Instead of building a massive mansion, David decided to keep the classic look of the old pub. His plan was to create 2 small homes and, in true Attenborough fashion, plant a lush orchard and build a brand-new fish pond to go with his existing flower garden. It's here, among the buzzing bees and the quiet ripples of his pond, that the world's most trusted man finds his peace. As he celebrates a full century of life, Sir David has been very open about the fact that he is approaching the end. He has no desire to find a new adventure or a flashier estate. He has found his sanctuary in the same garden where he and Jane once stood, surrounded by the nature he spent his life protecting. For David, this house is the finish line. It's the place where he's chosen to spend his final days, proving that after seeing the entire world, the most beautiful view is the one from your own backyard. It is here, in the home that holds his history and his heart, that he plans to take his final rest. But while David has found his peace in a quiet garden, the rest of the world is just starting to wake up to the message he has been preaching for decades. He spent the first half of his career showing us how the world works, and he is spending the second half fighting to make sure it doesn't stop. A Century for the Earth, how May 8, 2026 became a global day of gratitude. As the calendar flipped into the new millennium, David Attenborough's voice began to take on a whole new level of urgency. For years, he had shown us the beauty of the world, but by the year 2000, he knew it was time to show us the scars. In his series, State of the Planet, he didn't just point at pretty animals. He sat down with top scientists to ask the tough questions about how humans were actually affecting the Earth. He moved from being just a narrator to becoming a witness, tackling massive issues like global warming and the exploding human population. By 2019, David took his message to a global stage with the Netflix hit Our Planet. This was a huge shift. In his older BBC shows, he would usually wait until the very end of the episode to mention that a species was in trouble. But with Our Planet, the message was loud and clear from start to finish. We are the ones causing the destruction. His tone became much graver and more serious because he knew time was running out. He even released a documentary called A Life on Our Planet, which he called his witness statement. It was his way of saying, "I've seen the world change, and here is what we have to do to fix it." Even as he was becoming the face of the environmental movement, David never lost his trademark optimism. At the big COP26 climate summit, he stood in front of world leaders and called humans the greatest problem solvers to ever live. He told the younger generation that while he had spent his life watching the planet decline, they could be the ones to witness a wonderful recovery. It wasn't just talk either. Behind the scenes, he was putting his name and money behind projects to save rainforests in Borneo and Ecuador, protecting everything from giant albatrosses to tiny butterflies. Of course, staying this active for a century hasn't been easy on his body. David has had to deal with a pacemaker and even a double knee replacement. But when people asked him if he was ever going to retire, he just laughed. He said that if he were hewing coal for a living, he'd quit in a heartbeat. But since his job involves swanning round the world to look at fabulous things, he felt like the luckiest man alive. He kept going long after most people would have put their feet up, and the world loved him even more for it. Then came the big one. May 8th, 2026. Sir David Attenborough officially hit the 100-year mark. The entire world stopped to celebrate. He got a birthday card from King Charles III and was the guest of honor at a massive gala concert at the Royal Albert Hall. Imagine the scene. Thousands of people, including Prince William, standing up to sing Happy Birthday to the man who gave the planet a voice. The BBC even aired a special 90-minute tribute called David Attenborough's 100 Years on Planet Earth. It was the ultimate thank you to a man who had spent 7 decades as our greatest teacher. Even in his 100th year, the awards kept rolling in, including the prestigious Stephen Hawking Medal for his life's work in science communication. He has become more than just a broadcaster. He is a symbol of what it means to care about something bigger than us. He has spent his century-long journey showing us that we aren't just visitors on this planet. We are its guardians. As we look back at his incredible life, from catching newts as a boy to receiving standing ovations at 100, one thing is clear. David Attenborough didn't just show us the world. He taught us how to love it. And now, in his quiet sanctuary in Richmond, surrounded by his books, his fossils, and his memories, the legend finally has the chance to look out at his garden and see the wonderful recovery he always dreamed of. He gave us the map, he gave us the tools, and now it's up to us to finish the story he started. Are you a fan of David Attenborough? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the ENX video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it